Hey, everybody. I'm Dr. Natalie Marr. I'm here to help you learn to love your story. Really specifically, I'm here for women in midlife who feel stuck, feel like they've poured themselves into all the things they were told they should do, that they feel like their life should be a really great life, and yet they're really not liking their life. And they probably feel guilty about this. They don't know where to begin to crawl out of that. Some of us don't even realize that we're in that muck, right? And who am I? Who am I to tell you what to do? Well, I started Learn to Love Your Story back in 2020. And prior to that, in 2018 and 2019, I myself was coming to a crash and burn in my own life. Not the first time, not the second time. I dare to say, like, many times over had crashed and burned, but this one was pretty spectacular. So I had already started to put some of the material that I teach about together for myself. But I'm also a clinical psychologist of almost the last 2 decades. And so it's more than just what I've experienced. And I'm going out there and trying to help other people so they don't have to crash and burn quite as hard as I did. It also has a lot to do with how I've seen for 2 decades what works in therapy, what works to facilitate change, what gets in the way of people changing, like how we get in our own way. Anybody? And really how to break through some of those barriers. So I figure I'm going to put together a podcast. I have a YouTube channel. I have a website, learntoloveyourstory.com. I'm here for you, ladies. I'm here for you. And I'm here for the people who love you too. So if you're somebody who loves a woman in midlife that feels stuck, you know she feels stuck, you know that she's not in the place that she wants, send her my way, because this is going to be the podcast where I help you learn how to design the life you want to be living. How do you really create this life that is the actual dream? And if you don't know what that dream is, how to get there, how to even get to the point where you know the dream. So let me back up just a little ways. Back in 2020, 2019, really, I, started down this pathway of knowing that I had started a new leaf in my life. And it was really my goal heading into 2020, before the pandemic, heading into 2020, to design the life that I wanted to live. I had just been through a second divorce in 2018. 2019 was a lot of adjusting, left a group practice that I was working at, went into private practice by myself. There's a lot of reasons why 2018 and 2019 are not my favorite years. And they had jettisoned me into this place where I was like, okay, fine. So now I'm starting over, but this time I'm going to start over on my terms. Like, for real, I'm going to start over on my terms. I want to design a life that I want to live. And then the pandemic hit. Sound like a familiar story? Because I think that so many of us found ourselves in a predicament like this, right? Am I right? So when it hit, there were a few things going for me. One, that I had already kind of made up my mind that going back into my old patterns was not going to be something that I wanted to do. I knew the ending to that story. I knew the crash and burn ending to that story. And I did not want to do that to myself or to my kids or to anybody that I love or my clients or anybody else again. It really wrecks me. I'm not a very great version of myself when I go through things like that. And it hadn't been the first time. And so I had something going for me in 2020, and that was that I had set that guidepost. I want to help women draw this line in the sand, right? Before you even know what you need to know or what the life is that you want to design, I just want you to buy into this idea that it is in your purview to decide for yourself. I am going to design the life I want to live in. Had that going for me. Other things I had going for me. About 2 decades experience as a clinical psychologist. I've seen quite a bit as far as how change goes, when it isn't going, why it's not going, how trauma, because that's my area of expertise, really impacts us, and how subtle trauma is. Like, it doesn't have to be very much. I can't tell you, I would be a rich, rich, rich psychologist if I had a penny for every time I had heard an adult say, well, I had a good life. It wasn't like I was traumatized. I had a good life. I had everything provided for me. I did all the things that I was supposed to do. Sure, my dad was a little hard on me. Sure, it was a little chaotic after my parents' divorce. Sure, this, sure, that. I had a good life though, so I wasn't traumatized. Let me just tell you right now, it doesn't take much to meet the criteria in a child's little brain, in a child's little nervous system, for it to hit the trauma level. I would encourage you, and I'll put into the notes, just go over to the CDC's website and look up Adverse Childhood Experience Study, ACEs, ACES. ACEs is a really interesting longitudinal study. We started to do studies in the 90s on this. Okay. So we've collected quite a bit of data. We've modified things. We've started to look at it even more in depth. But essentially, the bottom line was that they found that these 10 adverse childhood experiences, so some of them are abuse and neglect and things of high caliber, some of them are not as big and more likely than not to have happened to you. Things like didn't feel like your family had your back, didn't feel like you belonged in your family, or even just a parent's divorce, could actually be one of these adverse experiences. And what we started to find in this research is that they became a really strong predictor of really poor health outcomes later in life. And what I mean by poor health outcomes is like years coming off people's lives when they've had 3, maybe 4 or more of these adverse childhood events happen to them. Years, like 20% more likely to have metabolic disorders, things like diabetes, heart diseases, lung diseases, just literally more likely to die sooner and to have health issues earlier and more pervasively throughout the lifetime. And of course, then we expanded this and saw, yeah, and by the way, mental health issues came up too. So like way higher incidences of depression and anxiety, way higher incidences of suicidal thoughts and even successes in this adult group. So what I bring this to your attention for is that it really doesn't take much to get a child into the place where they don't have enough resources to handle what's happening to them, that they're in a fight or flight state of mind. They're in survival mode because they're little and they don't have enough resources internally yet to take care of themselves in chaotic situations like parents divorcing. It's chaotic for them. It's life altering. It's traumatic for them. And even though our lives were good, as we in hindsight look back, if we experience some of these very traumatic events in our youth, they've had a permanent impact into our adulthood. I've built my private practice clinically off of this, but what became super clear to me as we headed into COVID is, holy buckets, like we are all going to go through a collective major life trauma, whether we think we are or not, because some of us have political leanings, belief systems, whatever, that tell us this isn't such a big deal. Does not matter, because that's in our thinking brain. But within our neurology, there is a part of us that, unbeknownst to us, is just going to know this is a life-threatening experience. It's a social threatening experience. And those are the 2 areas that muck up our system the most, when we feel like interpersonally we don't belong, or we're being ostracized or pushed away. Hello, social distancing. And when our physical bodies are at risk, and whether or not we believed it on a cognitive level or not didn't really matter. Everything in our life had changed around a virus, and our bodies knew that was a threat. So here we are, we're all coming out of a collective trauma. We're all going to have a bunch of impact from that. And I knew A, there weren't enough therapists in the world to sit across the couch from us. But B, not everybody's going to go to therapy. And not everybody's going to even know they need to go to therapy. And so I had started in 2020 with this idea of I'm going to design the life that I want to live in. Then COVID hit, and I decided, hey, I have a couple things running around in my head where I know some stuff that could be useful to people. And so I started to put material together, started to throw it out into the world on learntoloveyourstory.com and on my YouTube channel, Learn to Love Your Story, all in an effort to try and, help people help themselves, essentially. What happened to me though over 2020 is I started to read more often. I was walking more because I wasn't commuting. And so I was listening to podcasts and I was reading and listening to Audible, reading more books. And there were a handful of books that really impacted me over the course of 2020 and 2021. And those were Ada Calhoun's book, Why We Can't Sleep, which is essentially a really great text on what does midlife crisis look like for women in midlife right now. This Gen X generation doesn't look like, what we've been told is a traditional midlife crisis. Like these women aren't like divorcing their husbands, going and picking up a young thing and buying themselves a sports car. Like that's traditionally kind of the pop culture idea of what a midlife crisis is. By the way, that's not what it is. So just hear that loud and clear. However, what it ends up being for women is we're exhausted. We are flat out exhausted. And we're starting to kind of have to come to grips with the fact that we have engaged and participated in our own suffering because we bought into kind of the cage doesn't have a lock on it. We bought into it. We're in the cage. And we were sold a bad bill of goods about what was going to bring us joy in our life, families, careers, how we were going to do that, how we we're going to accomplish that. A lot of things were stacked against us. We're the Gen X group, men and women, are the most financially leveraged group of humans ever from before. And we likely are going to continue to be more leveraged even than the generations to follow. Like millennials have a better gig than us. They got out of school and into marketable jobs, not in a recession. 90s had a recession. You guys, we started to pick it back up. We thought we were doing good. We went and bought our houses. And then what happened? The market crashed. So like we've been, victimized by two major recessions and sandwiched into this group of people that we're just really financially leveraged. So there's all sorts of things that are happening while we're also embarking on midlife, which itself is a major life transition. And Ada Calhoun's book just does this really wonderful job of kind of giving you a face to the name of what does midlife crisis or what does midlife, poor adjustment look like for women in their somewhere in the range of 40 to 60 right now. It looks like we're exhausted. It looks like we don't like our lives. We tend to get isolated. We feel guilty about our feelings. We're not talking to one another about it. It's not good. Ladies, it's not good. So I read that book and it resonated with me on so many levels because I thought to myself, well, what the what? This is how I ended up in 2018 and 2019, like dive bombing in my own life. So there's there's a reason why women in my age group are finding themselves in these places. I also read, like many of you did, Untamed by Glennon Doyle. She's one of my favorite authors. And that book was life altering, right? I mean, didn't every woman have hashtag I'm a goddamn cheetah on their posts for like all of 2020? I mean, maybe even still, some people are, still listening to her podcast, We Can Do Hard Things. By the way, don't get anything for throwing out these books or podcasts. I'm not affiliated. No money is coming my way. So I'm just telling you these things because this is what guided me. And also the book Burnout, which is by doctors Emily and Amelia Nagoski. Beautiful book about how women are getting burned out, kind of all the ecological kind of concentric circles that feed into it. So like the macro level, here's our culture, and it kind of guides us into certain roles of caregiving, and has, conditioned us socially to believe that we should feel guilty doing self-care, that we should feel guilty setting boundaries, that we should be able to do all the things. Ada Calhoun's book really speaks very well to this issue as well. That's how we got conditioned to be where we are. And then, burnout then goes into, why this is horrible for us and how do we kind of complete that stress cycle and get ourselves into a better place so that we don't hit burnout. Because what happens for women is many times the bottom falls out, like our marriages go away. That was my problem. Our bodies quit on us. So we're, fighting some sort of major physical ailment. The stress levels are just so big. And COVID didn't make that any easier on any of us, but it certainly didn't make it easier on women. Women were out of the workplace at a percentage rate that was higher than it had been since the 80s, because we tended to be the ones that stopped working, worked less, and, were homeschooling the kids because there were no systems in place for, our kids. Where were they going to be? So here we are. I'm in 2020. I'm on my path to design the life that I want to live. I'm reading these things and I'm like, okay. So there's a group of people I identify with, because I am one, midlife women, that I really want to focus on. And here's why. Because I knew that there is a group of people, these women in midlife, that are infiltrating almost all areas where caretaking is happening. We tend to be in caretaking jobs. We're like nurses and teachers and therapists. We tend to be taking care of our kids more than our male counterparts in our relationships, and in our co-parenting. We tend to be also caretaking our adult family members. So it could be parents, could be just other family, as opposed to our male counterparts. So we're pulled in so many directions in caretaking that I figure, here's my theory. I figure if I can help this group of women learn how to design the life they want to live in, they will be they'll be their best selves. Like they will be a better version of themselves. I am a better version of myself today than you would have met me in 2018 and in 2019. And even in 2020, as I embarked on this journey, I am in a way better space now. And I know that when I'm at my best, it means that everything that I do is at its best. So my parenting is at its best. My clinical work with clients is at its best. My being a good sister is at its best. My being a good friend is at its best. So I am on a mission to help women figure out the code, right? So there's this other book that came out all the same time by Dr. Nicole LaPera, also a clinical psychologist. She has a following on Instagram and had started some self-healing coaching business on, a different level than just her clinical work, like a private practice, and was encouraged to put together a book. It's called How to Do the Work. And it's a beautiful book on a self-guided way to do the work, right? Like to figure out what it is that has you stopped, where it came out of your childhood, better understand it, bringing better awareness to it, practicing more compassion and taking care of yourself on a whole new radical level. And she really inspired me to want to do the same, to write this down, because there's just not enough of us putting this stuff out in the world. It's so needed. So not everybody's going to pick up her book. My book will probably look literally very similar to that. Although I would say mine will be more of a how to be a goddamn cheetah version of that, because I'm going to take it to the next level, people. I don't just want you to do your work so that you feel better in your life. I do need you to do your work so you feel better in your life. And I want you to level up and let go of all of this social conditioning that we've had for so very long that taught us that our lives should look a certain way. Because what I found sitting across the couch for thousands of hours from women just like myself and you is that actually is not the recipe for us, at least not all of us. It's for a good group of us, it's not the right recipe. Elements of it are. However, anything that is designed for you without your informing it is never going to meet the muster. And we weren't taught, like our male counterparts, to design lives for ourselves. We weren't pushed in the same way to, not that men don't have social conditioning they're struggling under too, because they do. Women, however, are really not given the option of choice, of agency, of going out and, putting yourself first and designing something that makes sense to you. What I know to be true is we're never going to undo the epigenetic, traditional genderized social conditioning of women will caretake. So these women are still in these places of caretaking. But if I can get you to be a better version of yourself, to really enjoy the life you have, to want to get up every single day, rediscovering joy in your life if you've had it and lost it, but even finding it for the first time, because so many of us just never had it. I want that for you. I want that up leveling, because if you have that, my friends, you can move mountains. I promise you. You will be in the place that you want to be. Now, disclaimer. This is not therapy. I'm on a podcast. I'll probably have this publicized on all the places because I still do have a private practice. So this is not therapy. It is not going to do all the work for you. Some of us do need a little assistance with that. Of course, I will give you tips on, hey, go, look up your favorite neighborhood therapist for help on this if you run up against this. More than that, though, I need you to commit, like I did at the beginning of 2020, that you will design the life you want to live in. You will. And in designing this life, you are saying no and saying goodbye to a very familiar life that you've had for a long time. Familiarity is oftentimes what sucks us back into what we have done for so long. We know the outcome. We've seen it. We've run up against it. My dumpster fires, girls, like seriously, I need to stop this. That's what I was heading into 2020, thinking to myself, I'm done with the dumpster fires. New dumpster fires, maybe, but I'm not going back to old dumpster fires. They're done. So I am telling you, this will be one of the pieces that's hard to wrestle through. I'm here for it though. Like in 2023, I'm offering free group coaching for the whole year. I want women to join my stuff. I want you. I really do. I have you in mind when I'm doing these things. I want to see the entire world shift. And I know this group has a capacity because of where it's placed in our society to have ripple effects into all other generations. We're caretakers. If I caretake you, you will caretake everyone else. And we could live in a better place. I promise you. It's going to be work. It's going to be uncomfortable. And it's going to be unfamiliar. And that is my big disclaimer. If you don't want to do work, that's fine. Don't. You don't have to. If you feel like you kind of like your life, or you just don't see it as like, well, I don't know. She talks about it like my life had to be a dumpster fire. Now, mine was. Yours does not have to be. Mine, however, was. And I really just am hoping beyond all hope that you yourself can pull together this energy behind having that intention of designing a life you really, really, really love. Because if you can come back to that true north, then the familiar that tries to pull you back in, the unfamiliar that scares the heck out of you, won't feel so heavy. If you have a true north, this goal of I am designing this life that I want to live in, you'll be able to do it, but it will be work and it will be uncomfortable. And you will be saying goodbye to parts of your life that you're not going to go back to. And that's, not for everybody. Listen to the podcast, even if you're not ready, because there might be something that as I'm, throwing out these podcasts that like, ooh, I like this idea. I'm going to have to think about that. It's tough though. It's really tough to come to the decision that going back to the familiar is the scarier thing to venturing out and creating a new map for yourself, right? I mean, so let me share a little bit more about me. I grew up in this family, Catholic family, so I'm culturally Catholic, do not practice, that, had very, very strict ideas about marriage, about its sanctity. And yet, my experience of my parents' marriage was they never loved each other, that my mom felt trapped. And she codependently kept trying to deal with, her alcoholic husband, who was more than a functional alcoholic because he had 5 kids and, in times that were quite lean, was able to stay middle class, if not upper middle class, through most of that. So it isn't like, you could say he was impaired, but he was interpersonally, like gravely. So was she. And so my experience of that was like they hated each other. That seriously was my experience. I don't know. I'd have to, interview all of my siblings to see what their piece on that was. But I know for me, it just was a match made in hell, clearly. Although the little kid in me wanted the stuff to just stay the same. I wanted my parents to love each other. I wanted to know what home was. I wanted it always to stay the same. That's just what kids want to do. And so being in that place where I could on the daily see that it wasn't going to ever be like that and wasn't like that and wanting it really it took its toll on me over time. It is not a surprise that I have been divorced twice. Hello. It is not a surprise that I watched that happen and it impacted and imprinted something on me that I didn't know was there. So I wouldn't have been able to shake it. And I went into other relationships with that poor imprint. And it took until my second divorce for me to really come and reckon with this, right? That I am in some ways imprinted. Maybe it wasn't my fault, but it certainly is my problem. I am imprinted with a map that I go into relationships with that is not working and does not serve me. And I had to reckon with that at a level that I hadn't prior to that. I thought I had because I've been in and out of therapy. I mean, therapists see therapists. Hey, surprise. I've been doing my work for a long time. And I had thought that I had gotten to the nuts and bolts of that, had not. And that was really my reckoning in 2018 and in 2019. And, what speared my, I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to design a life that I want. But being raised in that and being told that that was the ideal, like the ideal version of my adult self that I was, rigidly believing in from childhood on was that I'd be married, I'd have kids, and I'd have a career. And I'd be able to balance all of that and it'd be great. And I'd be joyful about it all the time. Well, it wasn't the case. And I don't think it wasn't for lack of effort on my part, because I did my best. And that, we go back to these books that kind of guided my thinking process as I was putting everything together with Learn to Love Your Story. Untamed is a really great, evidence of how we come to a reckoning with something like that. Like this it doesn't serve me. Ergo, it doesn't serve my kids. It doesn't serve my partner if I stay in something that's not working for me. And, everybody's version of where they arrive with something like that looks a little bit different. Mine was very, very painful. I had not anticipated that that was going to happen because I so rigidly believed if I was doing it right, I would be happy. So there must have been something wrong with how I was doing it. And what I've reckoned with in designing the life that I want to live is it may have been the design itself. And I didn't make that design. I bought into that design, but I didn't make that design for myself. Ada Calhoun, speaks to this idea that like the baby boomers, yeah, glass ceilings started to be broken through in the 60s and 70s with the women's lib second wave of the women's lib movement. The first being, turn of the century around the 19th to 20th century when we got the vote. So in the 60s and 70s, like glass ceilings all over the place were being broken and Title IX went into place and all of these things, right? And Ada really does this great job of saying, so here's the thing though, the baby boomer group then got to choose what they wanted to do with those broken glass ceilings. There was no map before them on how to do this. And so they really enjoyed choosing the things that they wanted to break glass ceilings with. The Gen X group that came behind them, their daughters, they were sold this idea that you better not screw this up. Like all the glass ceilings were broken. So now you get to do whatever you want to do, but you better do it and you better do it well. Go get those jobs. Go be in the sports. Go get the scholarships. It was set up in such a way that it wasn't actually by choice, but by edict. Like we better do it or we're somehow disgracing an entire, set of generations ahead of us that had to do the work of getting us these privileges. That's a tall order, my friends. And we hadn't started to dismantle the gender biased home life structure. And so we did this without relinquishing any of the other responsibilities that we had. So women in that Gen X group, on average, do way more of the household duties than their male counterparts. Why? Gender conditioning. We don't even realize we're doing it. It was just like the book of life rules we started to follow. So here you are, you have to make sure that meals are on the table, that the household is taken care of, that the blah, 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 blah over here is done, and work this 40, 50, 60 hour a week job. It's not possible to do that and not burn out. There literally isn't enough energetic ability to draw from in a human to be able to do all those things. And so we started to cripple ourselves in many different ways, and it would come out in different ways. So for some of us, it wrecked, our ability to go out into the workforce in a way that we felt was right for us. For some, it wrecked, our home life in some ways. For some, a little bit of both. It really harmed us though. And that's what I am trying to help women see is like this agenda was not ours. We did not set the design for our lives. We may have tried our dangdest, and some of us actually succeeded, but in succeeding felt awful. We had the job, we had the kids, we had the marriages, whatever it was that we were sold. We had it, we did the things, and we didn't like our life. Like we got there and we were like, this is what? I don't want this. And so I am trying to help women see, part of the issue here is that the design was wrong. And you didn't make the design. You bought the design because that's what we do as good, dutiful people. And women are very acculturated to be a dutiful, good girl. We wanted that. We wanted our gold stars. We got our gold stars, and our gold stars ended up being a life we didn't even want to be in. So now I want you to design the life you want to live in, the life you love, the life you get up every morning and you're like so excited to have another day. Okay. So if you are on board with this, my only caveat is it's work. It's uncomfortable, excruciatingly so at times, and you have to say goodbye to many of the familiar things you are not going back to, because they are a pathway to that old design that does not work for you, that does not serve you. We're going to design something new. And if you want to come on that journey with me, I want to go on it with you. So if you want to come on that journey with me, keep following, keep listening to my podcast. You can go to learntoloveyourstory.com, see what's up. Join my group coaching. It's free all through 2023. It's free. Join it, see what you think about any of these things. I want to be of service to women in midlife. I want to move the dial. I want to move forward. And I know you're the group of women that's going to get us there. So if I can help you, then you're going to get us someplace else. If all of us are doing better, I promise you, we're going to make big changes. We're going to move mountains, my lady. So keep following me. And on your week, I really just hope that you are able to start and percolate on this idea of, I'm going to set this goal for myself. 2023 is the year. I'm going to design the life I want to live. If that's you, follow me. I can take you to lots of fun places. Just stay on for the ride. Please commit for yourself. That is really the commitment. It's not to me. It's not to anybody else. It's to you. All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day. And on this crazy, wild journey we call life, learn to love your story. Can't wait to catch you next week.